You may have been in this situation before. You fast for 16 hours a day. You skip breakfast. You drink black coffee. You try to do everything right. But after a few weeks, your body doesn't change. The scale doesn't move. Your energy comes and goes. And a very dangerous question starts to form in your mind. Maybe I'm just not disciplined enough? Then you hear another whisper, very tempting. Omad. 1 meal a day. Fasting for 23 hours. Eating once a day. People say this is the shortcut. Faster fat loss. Higher ketones. Stronger autophagy. Longer lifespan. And you start to think, maybe I need to go further. Push harder. Endure more. But the truth is this. Your body does not respond the same way to 16 to 8 and Omad. Not at all. And if you choose the wrong method for the wrong stage of your body, you are not just wasting time. You may be quietly disrupting your hormones, raising morning blood sugar, losing muscle, and wondering why you feel more exhausted than ever despite eating less than ever. This video is not here to encourage you to fast more. It is also not here to scare you away from fasting. It is here for one reason only, to help you understand what is actually happening inside your body, so you no longer have to guess, blame yourself, or chase extreme advice. To understand the difference between 16 to 8 and Omad, we have to start with the truth that many health videos completely overlook. Your body does not burn fat simply because you eat fewer calories. It burns fat only when the biological conditions allow it. And that condition has a name: insulin. Insulin is not bad. It is not the enemy. It is a survival hormone. Every time you eat, especially carbohydrates and sugar, glucose enters your bloodstream. Your pancreas releases insulin. Insulin tells your cells, energy is available. Use it. And if there's extra, store it. The problem is not insulin itself. The problem is that insulin never gets the chance to come down. When insulin is high, your body is locked in storage mode. In that state, burning fat is not just difficult, it is almost impossible. Fat sits inside fat cells, like money in a locked safe. You can exercise, you can eat less. But if insulin stays high, that safe never opens. Only when you stop eating long enough does insulin fall to a level that allows the body to open the safe. And that is when biology shifts gears. First, the body uses glycogen-stored sugar in the liver, but the liver can only store about 80 to 100 grams of glycogen. That's enough for light activity at best. After roughly 10 to 14 hours without food, this supply begins to run out. And this is the critical moment most people never notice. The metabolic switch turns on. The body shifts from burning glucose to burning fat. Fat cells begin releasing fatty acids. The liver takes those fatty acids and converts them into ketones. Ketones are not a trend. They are an ancient fuel, cleaner, more stable, and especially friendly to the brain. When the brain switches to using ketones, many people describe the same experience: clearer thinking, deeper focus, fewer scattered thoughts, and this has nothing to do with strong willpower. It is evolutionary biology. Our ancestors did not eat 3 meals a day on schedule. They hunted when hungry. If their brains became foggy without food, the human species would have gone extinct long ago. Instead, the body was designed to become sharper when food is scarce, not weaker. Fasting activates BDNF, a factor that supports neuron growth, connection, and repair. In other words, when fasting is done correctly, the brain doesn't shut down, it upgrades. But here is the key point. You only reach this state if you fast long enough. And long enough is not the same for everyone. With 16 to 8, most people spend only about 2 to 6 hours per day in a true fat-burning state. With Omad, that window can stretch to 8 to 10 hours or more. On the surface, Omad seems to win decisively. But biology is not as simple as a math equation, because time is not the only factor. How you eat when you eat again matters just as much, sometimes even more. And this is where the story begins to split. 16 to 8 is not simply skipping breakfast. It is a relatively gentle biological rhythm. You eat within an 8-hour window. Insulin rises and then falls. Each day, the body practices switching fuel sources. Over time, insulin sensitivity improves. Growth hormone increases. Muscle is preserved. Sleep often improves when late-night eating stops. Most importantly, 16 to 8 fits real life. You can still have lunch with colleagues. Dinner with family. No explanations needed. No isolation. No living as if you're running a harsh personal experiment. Omad is different. Omad is a hard push. A deep fast. Insulin drops very low. Ketones rise high. Autophagy increases. But when you eat again, you are not eating a normal meal. You are trying to compress an entire day's nutrition into 1 hour. One large meal creates a strong insulin spike. The swing from deep fasting to heavy eating becomes a kind of hormonal whiplash. For some people, this may be tolerable in the short term. For many others, it leads to fatigue, digestive issues, insomnia, and a persistent sense of tension they can't quite explain. And here is a crucial real-life insight. Your body does not know that you are dieting. It only knows whether you are safe or not. If fasting keeps cortisol chronically elevated, if refeeding causes violent insulin swings, the body will prioritize survival, not optimization. And in that state, fat loss, hormones, energy, and mood all suffer. What many people misunderstand is this. They assume fatigue, irritability, and poor sleep are signs that they haven't adapted yet. But sometimes, those are signs that the method simply does not match the current stage of your life. This is where I want you to pause for a moment before deciding which direction to go. There is something I've noticed after years of working with people who fast. Most people don't fail because they lack knowledge. They fail because they listen to their bodies through someone else's ears. They see one person succeed with Omad, another boasting sky-high ketones, deep autophagy, rapid fat loss, and they think, if I can't do that, I must be weak. But biology does not operate on inspiration. It operates on context. Imagine two very different people. One is an office worker, sleeping 5 to 6 hours a night, under constant job stress, eating irregularly, relying on coffee to stay alert. The other has trained consistently for years, sleeps well, eats clean, has stable blood sugar, and is already accustomed to mild hunger. Put both of them on the same Omad protocol, the outcomes will be completely different. The second person may experience sharp focus, stable energy, and clear fat loss. The first may experience a racing heart, insomnia, irritability, mental fog, and a hard-to-name internal tension. Not because Omad is bad, but because their nervous system is not ready. What very few viral videos say clearly is this. Fasting is not just about fat and insulin. It is about the stress axis. When you extend the time without food, the body asks a very primitive question. Are we safe? If the answer is yes, because you sleep well, nourish yourself properly, and live in relative stability, fasting becomes an optimizing signal. If the answer is not sure because of stress, sleep deprivation, psychological pressure, fasting becomes a threat. And in biology, threat always overrides optimization. That is why so many people say, the longer I fast, the more exhausted I feel. Not because they are doing the technique wrong, but because their system is already overloaded. In that context, 16 to 8 acts like a bridge. It does not force the body to leap into an extreme state. It allows insulin to rise and fall each day. It allows the body to train fuel switching gradually. It allows growth hormone to increase without driving cortisol too high. And most importantly, 16 to 8 allows you to live like a normal human being. You still eat 2 or 3 meals within the 8-hour window. You don't have to cram an entire day's nutrition into one sitting. You don't sit at a family table with only a glass of water, telling yourself you're more disciplined than everyone else. You don't turn health into a social battle. Many people underestimate this factor. But social isolation is a real biological stress. The body does not distinguish between stress from work and stress from constantly having to explain why you are not eating. When 16 to 8 is done properly, many changes happen quietly. Blood sugar becomes more stable, insulin sensitivity improves, morning energy increases, sleep deepens when late-night eating disappears. And interestingly, hunger becomes clearer rather than vague. You begin to distinguish true hunger from habit-driven hunger. But let's be honest. 16 to 8 is not a miracle. If your eating window is filled with sugar, snacks, and ultra-processed foods, fasting will not save you. Fasting is not a license to eat anything. It is simply a time frame that allows biology to work more favorably. And then there are people who do 16 to 8 very well. A few months pass. The body adapts. Hunger is no longer frightening. The mind feels stable. At that point, curiosity naturally arises. What if I go further? This is where Omad can enter the picture not as an identity, but as a tool. The problem is that many people approach Omad with the wrong mindset. They treat it as a measure of discipline. Whoever fasts longer is stronger. Whoever eats fewer meals is more optimized. And when health begins to push back, they don't adjust. They force. Biology does not reward force. It responds only with adaptation or breakdown. Omad places the body into a deep fasting state. Glycogen is fully depleted. Ketones rise. Autophagy increases. But when you refeed, if you are not extremely careful, you create a rebound shock. Insulin spikes sharply. The digestive system is forced to process a large volume of food in a short time. For many people, this leads to bloating, reflux, or even insomnia because the body is still digesting when they are trying to rest. There is also a very practical issue: nutrition. Getting enough protein, fiber, and micronutrients in one meal is far more difficult than distributing them across the day. Many people on Omad lose weight, but also lose muscle, not because fasting burns muscle, but because they simply don't provide enough raw material to preserve lean tissue. Then there is the psychological factor. Fasting all day and eating once can easily create an unhealthy relationship with food. Some people become obsessive, some binge, some feel guilty if they eat the wrong thing. This is not a personal failure. It is a predictable response of the brain when the hunger-satiety cycle is stretched too far. That is why many people quit Omad not because they are weak, but because their lives cannot revolve around an extreme protocol forever. And here, I want you to hear this very clearly. Omad is not wrong, but it is not appropriate for every stage of every person's life. If you are stressed, sleep-deprived, hormonally dysregulated, have a history of emotional eating, or simply need stability in your life, 16 to 8 is often a far wiser choice. It is not flashy, but it builds a foundation. Metabolic health is not about sprinting straight to the summit. It is more like laying a foundation, solid first, then higher. And here is a paradox worth noticing. Many people pursue fasting in search of control, but end up losing connection with their bodies, when in fact, the true purpose of fasting done well is to restore the ability to listen inward. When you no longer panic at mild hunger, when you no longer need to eat immediately just to feel okay, when your energy no longer depends on snacks and caffeine. That is metabolic freedom. And it does not come from fasting the longest. It comes from choosing the right rhythm. There is a very common misunderstanding I want you to set aside for a moment before continuing. Many people believe that if you don't eat, the brain becomes weak. If you don't eat, you can't focus. If you don't eat, you become irritable, foggy, drained. It sounds reasonable. But biologically, it is not entirely true. What actually exhausts the brain is not short-term lack of food. What exhausts the brain is constant fluctuation. When you eat many times a day, especially sugar and refined carbohydrates, the brain is pulled into a strange loop. Each eating event triggers a dopamine rise, the neurotransmitter of anticipation and motivation. That rise does not last. It spikes quickly and falls quickly. And when it falls, the brain starts searching for the next hit. You are not hungry because your body needs energy. You are hungry because your brain is demanding stimulation. Over time, repeated dopamine spikes dull the brain. Much like listening to loud music, too often you need to turn the volume up just to feel enough. At that point, eating no longer brings satisfaction. It merely temporarily numbs a sense of emptiness. And once it does, the loop begins again. This is where fasting, when done correctly, begins to have a very deep effect that is rarely explained properly. When you don't eat for a long enough period, dopamine is no longer being triggered by food. At first, the brain reacts with discomfort, restlessness, irritability, even unexplained sadness. Many people interpret this as a sign that fasting isn't for me. But the truth is, the brain is recalibrating. When stimulation disappears, the brain relearns how to function at baseline. Dopamine no longer spikes and crashes. It becomes more stable. And when dopamine stabilizes, something surprising happens. The mind becomes calmer, not euphoric, but clear. Not agitated, but focused. Not forced, but motivated. This is why many people, after getting through the initial phase of fasting, say they feel more at peace. Not because they care less about life, but because their brains are no longer being constantly pulled by small impulses. At the same time, another biological factor quietly increases: BDNF. This is a protein many scientists call fertilizer for the brain. It helps neurons form new connections, repair old damage, and improve adaptability. When BDNF rises, you don't just think more clearly. You react more slowly to emotions. And here is a very real-life insight. Many eating behaviors do not come from hunger. They come from not knowing what to do with our emotions. Sad eat, stressed eat, bored eat. Food becomes a quick emotional regulator. Fasting, when not forced, makes you sit with those signals. At first, this is uncomfortable. But over time, the brain learns that emotions can pass without being numbed by food. And once that lesson is learned enough times, the relationship with food begins to change. You no longer eat to escape. You eat because you choose to. This ties closely to another hormone, leptin, the satiety hormone. Chronic high insulin from frequent sugar intake makes the brain less able to hear leptin's signal. You eat, but never feel satisfied. When fasting and simpler eating lower insulin, leptin can be heard again. Hunger becomes more accurate. It arrives when needed and leaves when enough. This is not discipline. This is biological alignment. But let me be very clear about one crucial point, especially in an internet culture full of extreme advice. Not everyone should fast for long periods. And fasting is not always the right next step. If you are sleeping poorly, highly stressed, emotionally unstable, or using fasting as a way to punish your body, then the benefits you hear about online may not come to you. Not because you are doing something wrong, but because your body needs stability before it needs challenge. Biology is fair. It does not reward endurance. It rewards listening. Many people enter fasting with the mindset, I need to be stronger. But paradoxically, those who succeed long-term often begin with a different question. What do I actually need right now? Some people need more discipline. Some need to soften. Some need sleep. Some need to eat enough before they even think about fasting. Fasting is not a cure-all. It is a tool. And a tool is only useful when applied at the right time. One of the most powerful moments many people describe is not when they lose fat quickly or reach high ketone levels. It is the moment they realize, I am no longer controlled by mild hunger. Not because they suppress it, but because their body trusts that food will return. That trust matters. When the body believes that absence is temporary, it stops panicking. Cortisol drops, the nervous system settles, and only in that state does healing have room to occur. This is why flexible fasting protocols such as 16 to 8 or occasional Omad often work better than prolonged extreme models. They create rhythm, absence and recovery, tension and release. That is how biology operates. And when you begin to feel that rhythm, something interesting happens. You no longer need to constantly ask, "What should I do?" You start to feel what fits. Hunger becomes information, not a command. Satiety becomes a signal, not guilt. Eating becomes part of life, not an internal battle. At this point, the story of fasting takes a different direction. It is no longer about fat loss. It becomes about living in greater harmony with your body. There is a very important moment I want you to pause at before deciding to fast longer, tighten harder, or try a more advanced method. That moment does not come from knowledge. It comes from a simple question that is often ignored. How is my body responding? Not the response on the scale, not the response on an app, but the response in your sleep, mood, energy, and inner sense of safety. Biology does not speak in words. It speaks in signals, and many of us have been trained to ignore those signals for far too long. If you fast and sleep worse, wake up more tired, feel more irritable, experience a racing heart, or carry constant inner tension that is not a phase you must push through, that is data. And that data is telling you your system is under more pressure than it can adapt to. Here is where I need to be very clear, direct, and responsible. Not everyone should fast 23 hours a day, and not everyone will benefit from Omad, no matter how compelling the internet makes it sound. There are groups for whom prolonged fasting is not optimal, but risky. Pregnant or breastfeeding women whose bodies require a steady energy supply. People with a history of eating disorders, fasting can reactivate dangerous cycles. Individuals with type 1 diabetes or insulin dependence, glucose swings are not something to experiment with. Those who are underweight, malnourished, hypotensive, or recovering from illness, their bodies do not have the reserves for extreme approaches. In these cases, not fasting is not failure. It is intelligence. And even for healthy individuals, there are life phases when fasting should not be a priority. Periods of intense stress, chronic sleep deprivation, emotional instability, or when discipline is being used to suppress rather than support. In those phases, adding another layer of endurance rarely brings healing. One of the biggest mistakes of modern health culture is turning everything into a test of willpower. Fasting longer, training harder, tightening control. But the body does not learn through force. It learns through trust. When the body trusts that food will return, when it trusts that hunger is not a threat, when it trusts that you are cooperating, not punishing, that is when metabolic flexibility emerges. And metabolic flexibility is the true goal, not 16 hours, not 23 hours, but the ability to function well with food and without food, to eat when needed, to stop when enough, without panic, without obsession. Many people pursue fasting to control themselves. Yet the irony is that when fasting is done correctly, the need for control disappears. There is no constant inner negotiation, no looping debate of eat or don't eat. You know when to eat, and you trust that you can wait a little longer if needed. That is not willpower. That is inner calm. One thing I truly hope you carry with you after this video is this. Health is not a shape, a number, or a protocol. Health is when your body stops feeling like a burden to manage and starts feeling like a teammate. When you sleep more deeply, when energy no longer swings wildly, when you eat without guilt, when you feel hunger without fear, that is when biology is working with you, not against you. You may start with 16 to 8 and never need Omad. You may use Omad occasionally 1 day a week as a tool to stimulate autophagy without disrupting hormones. You may try it and decide it is not for you. All of these are valid. There is no single right path for everyone. There is only the path that fits. And if there is one final thing I want you to remember, it is this. You do not need to do everything perfectly to deserve results. You do not need to fast the longest, eat the least, or endure the most. You only need to listen to your body a little more than you did yesterday. If today you cut out late-night eating, that is progress. If you can tell true hunger from emotional hunger, that is progress. If you sleep better, that is progress. Sustainable health is built through small steps like these, not through extreme leaps. And if along the way you pause, adjust, or change direction, that is not quitting. That is biological intelligence being restored. Your body is always speaking to you. The only question is, are you listening? If this video made you feel lighter, more understood, or less pressured to do it right, then a real connection has already happened. And if you are on this journey, whether just beginning or already partway down the road, remember that you are not alone. We are relearning how to live in alignment with biology. One meal, one breath, one day at a time. Before this video ends, I want you to do one very small thing. No note-taking, no remembering numbers. Just take a deep breath and ask yourself one simple question. Lately, how have I been treating my body? Not how many hours you've fasted, not how many kilos you've lost, but whether you are living in a lighter state or a more tense one. Because if there is one thing modern health science is gradually recognizing, it is this. The body does not need more pressure to become healthy. It needs less noise, less fear, less self-blame, less of the constant feeling that you must always do it right. Many of us enter a health journey with a quiet belief. Something about me needs fixing. Fixing weight, fixing habits, fixing ourselves. But over time, those who change most deeply often arrive somewhere else. They stop trying to fix and start listening. They listen to real hunger. They listen to fatigue. They listen to days that need rest. And they allow their bodies to have their own rhythm. Fasting, when placed in the right context, is not deprivation. It is a pause for the body to clean up, a pause for the mind to settle, a pause to realize that you do not need to constantly take in order to survive. But a pause only has meaning if you return kindly. Eating again with presence, eating again with gratitude, eating again without punishment. Because biology always works in cycles, absence and recovery, tension and release. If only one side exists, the system breaks. If you're still watching and thinking, finally, someone isn't telling me to endure more, then perhaps your body has been tired from being pulled for too long. And that does not mean weakness. It means you have been trying very hard. You may not apply everything you heard today, and that is completely okay. Health is not a checklist. It is a relationship. And like any healthy relationship, it needs time, patience, and a little gentleness. If tomorrow you do just one small thing for your body, go to bed a little earlier, eat a little more slowly, or simply stop criticizing yourself for one meal that is already real progress. These steps don't make headlines. They don't go viral, but they accumulate. And it is these quiet accumulations that create lasting health. If this video helped you understand your body a little better, or feel a little less alone on this journey, then that is why this channel exists. We are not here to issue commands. We are here to clarify what biology has always known, but modern life has made us forget. If you want to continue conversations like this non-extreme, non-judgmental, without turning health into a competition, you can subscribe to the channel, not to chase algorithms, but so that each week you have a place to return to listen to your body through the language of science and understanding. And if you are in a difficult phase, tired, confused, or feeling like you're never doing it right, remember this. Your body is not against you. It is trying to protect you in the only way it knows how. When you stop fighting it, many things begin to change. Thank you for staying until the very end. Not because you needed more information, but because you were curious enough and cared enough about yourself. This journey does not need to be fast. It only needs to be real. See you in the next video. And until then, remember, Your body is always worthy of being listened to.